Uncle Trev and the Calendar by Jack Lasenby. Uncle Trev sipped at his tea, but it must have been too hot because he put down the cup and looked at me. "I've decided to reform the calendar," he said. The butcher had given us his calendar with a bright picture of a couple of kittens. Mum had put it on the back of the dunny door. I looked at Uncle Trev. "Yep," he said, "the calendar. I thought I might have a go at reforming it." "Drink your tea," said my mother, "before it gets cold. The child has enough crazy notions without needing any more from you." She took the Chook's pot off the back of the stove, went out to mix the scraps with Pollard. Uncle Trev poured his tea into the saucer and sucked at it. "Ah," he said, and had another noisy suck. "Ah, that's better." "Here she comes," I said, as he guzzled away again. He'd got it all down and had the cup back on its saucer just as Mum came in. "Would you like another cup of tea?" she asked Uncle Trev. "It's a raw old day out there." Uncle Trev held out his cup and saucer, and Mum carried them over to the bench. "I didn't spill your tea," she said. "You've been drinking it out of the saucer again, haven't you?" Uncle Trev spread his hands to the warmth from the stove. "It's a cold day," he said. "Those chooks of yours will be grateful for something warm inside of them on a day like this." My mother handed him his cup on a clean saucer. "Mrs. Packham's chooks have gone off laying," she said. "You mark my words, I'll be the only one in the street with eggs before long, and it's all because my chooks get a good hot mash every day." She attacked their pot, a black enamel saucepan without a handle, scouring away at it with hand soap, then banging it back onto the stove, where it would begin its never-ending task of boiling up the scraps for the chook's next hot mash. "Now," she said to Uncle Trev, "I'm out of vanilla essence, and I'll need some dates if you're going to have some scones to take home with you tonight. So I'll just pop down to the shop and pick up the paper and the mail while I'm about it, and you can keep this misery company while I'm out." She turned to me. "You mind you keep that blanket wrapped around you," she said. "Don't you dare move from in front of the stove." She gave us both a menacing look from her dark eyes, and was gone. "Sometimes," said Uncle Trev, "she reminds me of Napoleon." "What about that calendar?" I asked him. "Oh yes," he said, "the calendar. Well, you know how they count time from the birth of Christ, all that BC and AD stuff. So this is the 1930s we're in now. Well, I was thinking about it the other day, and decided we'd better off starting from something more recent, like the Great Plague." "Mum will give you a piece of her mind if she hears you wanting to change that," I said. "You know what she said about you not going to church." "Well, that's all very well," said Uncle Trev, "but what's going to happen when we get to the end of the century? It's easy enough for us to talk about 1931 and 1932 and so on, 1940, 1950. It's all very well, but what about when we get to the end of the century, eh? You tell me that. Who's going to want to go getting their tongue round 2022? Or will we say 2022? "Oh, I hadn't thought about it," I said. "No," said my uncle, "but it's things like those things occasionally, or the world would be in a right old mess. What about the year after the year 2000? And the end of the century? Are we going around saying 2001 or 2001 or 2001? I tell you, there's going to be all sorts of confusion if we don't get it straightened out fairly soon." I said. "I've been reading about some geezer with a foreign name," Uncle Trev said. "Johann Gutenberg, he's called. He invented printing, real printing, in 1454. Now, if we started counting time from then, that'd put us in the 5th century AG, about 480-something AG, I reckon." I thought I'd work it out later. I didn't trust Uncle Trev's arithmetic, not when he was trying to prove something. "Don't you see," he said, "we wouldn't have to bother about how to say the date when the end of the century comes. That'd be somebody else's problem in another 1500 years. "I see," I said. "Been reading a book about that Johnny Gutenberg fellow," Uncle Trev said, "and I reckon his invention's done more to change our lives than anything else." "You be careful in case Mum hears you," I said. "Oh, that's okay," said Uncle Trev. "One of his first jobs was to print the Bible, so I'm safe from her. But I've been reading about that old Napoleon too. Now, I've always reckoned he was just another bloodthirsty general who got no more than he deserved, marooned on a rock for the rest of his life. But he actually had some good ideas when he was running France, old Napoleon. He metricated the place." Uncle Trev was getting excited. I could tell by his voice. You know, he said, decimals. We haven't done decimals at school yet, I said. It makes arithmetic easy, said Uncle Trev. You just divide or multiply everything by 10 and shove a decimal point along the line. It'd save New Zealand millions of hours a year if people were shoving that decimal point along the line instead of adding up pounds and shillings and pence and getting them wrong more often than not. Any fool could run a shop with decimal money, said Uncle Trev. I nodded. I liked the sound of it. Adding pounds and shillings and pence took ages, and I always got it wrong when we had to multiply. It's not just the money either, said Uncle Trev. We'd get rid of chains and furlongs and pounds and ounces. Everything would be in tens. I tell you, he said, it'd make life a lot easier for a farmer. Yeah, I said. The thought about metricating time too, said Uncle Trev. Now you take 365. It's a pretty dozy sort of number of days to have in a year, isn't it? I suppose so, I said. Never thought about it. You'll get the idea, said Uncle Trev. Well, from now on, I'm metricating my farm. The year's going to have 1,000 days in it. There'll be 10 months with 100 days in each. And each month will have 10 weeks with 10 days in each of them. So each day would have 10 hours with 10 minutes and 10 seconds, I said. Didn't I say you'd get it? Uncle Trev exclaimed. I paused. Wouldn't the days be a bit short with only 10 hours, I asked. Oh, it just depends how long you make them, said Uncle Trev. I'm working it out at home now. I'll see if I can get the cows used to my decimal time first. Then I'll start on the pigs. There'll be no trouble with the sheep. The pigs, I knew, would understand it quickly, because Uncle Trev's always said they're such clever animals. But I wanted to ask him how he was going to explain it to the cows. He held up his hand, though. Ah, that'll be the gate, he said. Now, not a word of this to your mother. If she hears we're planning to change before Christ to before Gutenberg, she'll skin us alive. He tapped the side of his nose with his finger and nodded. I tapped my nose back at him. Mum came rushing in. It's time you were getting up to the sale yards, she said, if you want to be there in time to buy those sheep you were talking about. I spoke to Mr. Silver down at the shop, and he's on his way already. He's not one to sit around wasting time. Ah, said Uncle Trev, and he nodded at me. I've got an idea or two about time myself. He stuck his hand in front of his coat, like Napoleon, and nodded at Mum. She didn't think it was very funny and glared at him, but he was heading back for the door. I might just have discovered a way of running time instead of letting it run me, he said, and he disappeared. Mum made us a cup of tea. Well, I've got all day to make those scones for him to take home, she said. I'll just have a quick look at the Herald before I get on with the housework. She sat at the table with her cup of tea, reading the paper. I stared at the swordfish-shaped hinges on the oven door and was thinking of the time Uncle Trev caught the world record sortie when my mother snorted. Ugh, these men, she said. Here's one of those MPs down in Wellington, wants to change our money around. He wants to make it all metric. Says it would make it easier to multiply and divide. I've never heard such nonsense. Oh, I said. I think I heard Uncle Trev talking of something like that. Oh, he would, said my mother. Just wait till he calls in on his way home from the sale yards. I'll give him metric. He can keep his interfering hands off our money. Next thing he'll be wanting to alter the clocks. We had pounds and shillings and pence when I was a girl, and if it was good enough for us, it'll be good enough for you too. She got up and took her cup to the bench. I heard a little click. There, said Mum. I thought for a moment I'd knocked the handle off my cup on the tap. It's all your uncle's doing. Can't leave things alone for a moment, but he's in here with another of his crackpot ideas. I was silent. Sometimes, I thought to myself, Mum knew Uncle Trev was having one of his ideas before even he did. I looked at the Herald where Mum had left it on the table. She was shaking out the sack she kept on the floor inside the back door. I could hear her thumping it on the side of the path. Whack, whack, whack. Poor Uncle Trev, I thought. He's going to get it when he calls in on his way home.